How can you motivate people? How can you get them to do what you want them to do willingly and enthusiastically? Listen to a manager talking to an employee.
Now, Frank, I'm depending on you to prepare a dynamite retail marketing plan for our new high-speed printers. I don't mean to pressure you, but time is of the essence here, and we're behind on this one. That's why we thought of you. You're the best we've got to get back on track and get distribution out to the stores. Could you get a plan on my desk, say, a week from Monday? I'd really appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
What was that?
I said okay, but you do understand that I do have other things that need to be done? I guess I can work it into my schedule.
I hope so, Frank.
Well, what have we here? Seems like a manager has asked his employee to do something entirely within the scope of his abilities and job requirements, but unfortunately, the employee, Frank, just doesn't seem too excited or motivated to do the job. For the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to discuss motivation in the workplace, how to get people to do what you want them to do, and to do it enthusiastically. We'll describe some of the major motivation theories, and we'll identify the people who propose them. At the same time, we'll present brief vignettes to illustrate the theories. Listening to this tape will help you learn how to motivate employees in many different situations, and even how to motivate people in your personal or social life. I'm David Woods, your host for this Salinger audio tape on motivation. The word motivation comes from the Latin word movere, which means to move, which is exactly what the manager we just heard was trying to get Frank to do. However, for the purposes of our discussion here, motivation is the process concerned with what energizes human behavior, what directs or channels such behavior, and how this behavior is or can be maintained. First of all, it's important that we understand that there are forces within individuals that drive them to behave in certain ways, and there are environmental forces that often trigger those drives. It's also important to understand that a person's behavior is goal-oriented. That is, behavior is seldom random, but rather is directed towards some desired end. Finally, it's important to know that motivation is best understood in the context of the system within which it operates, namely, people interacting with other people. The forces operating within the person, the forces in the surrounding environment, and feedback from the interaction between these forces all affect motivation. Managers of 100 years ago and before were interested in productivity and only productivity, how to get the most production in the shortest time for the least money. In a management sense, the earliest motivators were what we now call external, tangible rewards like money, or physical punishments like beating or withholding food. If you wanted someone to do something or to do more of something, you offered money. If that didn't work, you tried punishment, for example, withholding pay, or worse. While it is true that punishment or the threat of it can be a prime motivator, its ultimate effect may result in negating the purpose for using it in the first place. Rather than creating more positive behavior in a worker, punishment often leads to anger, resentment, and an eventual recurrence of the undesirable behavior. Very early in the history of manager-employee relations, managers learned that an external reward, like money, wasn't the only motivator that could lead to a desired behavior. Praise was also found to be an excellent motivator. Quite simply, by praising a worker's performance on the job, a manager can reinforce the worker's positive behavior and encourage him or her to continue to do his or her good work. However, too much praise can backfire. If a worker hears praise all the time, it loses its impact and can create the impression in the worker's mind that if the worker is doing such a great job all the time, why isn't he or she paid more? In addition, too much praise raises a question in the worker's mind about either the validity of the praise or the sincerity of the praise giver. When it comes to giving praise, a little goes a long way. Positive rewards, such as money or praise, or negative rewards, like punishment, are considered external motivators. That is, they affect an employee from the outside. Someone other than the worker provides the stimulus for the motivation. If we consider the definition of motivation we made a few minutes ago, we'll recall that it is not only outside environmental forces that drive a person to behave in a particular way, but there are also forces within an individual that direct them towards certain behavior. These forces within individuals that make them either continue to behave in the same way or dissuade them from that behavior are considered internal motivators. And it is the concept of developing and maintaining these internal motivators that we will be discussing in greater detail throughout this tape.
You are listening to the Salinger audio tape on motivation. The concept of reward and punishment as external motivators has just been addressed. Coming up, a discussion of internal motivators, specifically the human relations and needs theories of Abraham Maslow and the impact his ideas had on human relations.
After World War II, Abraham Maslow, a clinical psychologist, proposed that people are primarily wanting creatures, motivated by a desire to satisfy certain specific needs. Based on clinical observations, Maslow said that people are intent on satisfying the following needs, organized into 5 categories.
1. Physiological needs.
Physiological needs are considered the most fundamental needs and include the basic biological needs of the body, the needs for food, water, and sex.
2. Safety needs.
The second set of needs, safety needs, centers around the need to have a safe and secure physical and emotional environment, free from threats to continued existence.
3. Social, belongingness, or love needs.
Social needs relate to one's desires to be accepted by one's peers and to have friends and lasting relationships. Man, after all, is a social, not a solitary animal.
4. Esteem needs.
Esteem needs focus on one's desire to have a positive self-image and to receive recognition, attention, and appreciation from others for whatever one is or does.
5. Self-actualization needs.
Maslow considered self-actualization to be the individual's highest need. It is the need category in which the individual is concerned with developing or achieving his or her fullest potential, or becoming all that it is possible for a person to become. According to Maslow, those needs that are largely unsatisfied create tension in an individual. That tension leads him or her to behave in certain ways in order to eliminate the tension and so restore internal equilibrium. To motivate a person, then, you need only make it possible for that person to satisfy a need. For example, hunger, the need for food, motivates a person to do whatever must be done to get food. Offer that person food, and he or she will be motivated. But once a person has eaten, the need is satisfied, and hunger ceases to motivate, at least until that person again becomes hungry. Other needs theories of motivation have been proposed on models similar to Maslow's. Unique to Maslow, however, is his premise that the needs people pursue are universal and that they are arranged sequentially in a hierarchy. Maslow said that if a low-level need, a physiological need like hunger, is unsatisfied, it will dominate a person's thoughts and actions. Once satisfied, however, another higher-level need, like safety needs or social needs, takes its place. Man, Maslow said, is an ever-wanting animal. So once a person's hunger is satisfied, that person will next be concerned about safety, preserving his or her life. And once safety needs are met, the individual will be concerned about social needs. The need for friends and lovers takes over, and so on.
How's it going, Ray?
Pretty good, I guess.
Julie and the kids okay?
Oh, yeah, they're fine. We got a new gas barbecue over the weekend. Last night we ate barbecued steaks and chicken on our picnic table in the backyard. The kids love it. I made a nice little area out back for the barbecue. Looks real good. How about if you and Shirley come over next weekend? Bring your bathing suits and stay for dinner.
We'd love to. Thanks for the invite.
Sure. We look forward to having you. Say, Tom, did Peter say anything to you about the proposal I made last week on the Wellman contract?
No, he didn't.
You know, I worked 2 weeks on that, and even showed it to Julie the night before I was to present it to Peter, just to make sure it flowed properly and made the right impact. I thought I did a great job on it. And now the longer I go without hearing any feedback from Peter, the more discouraged I get. It's beginning to affect my other work.
I know how you feel. It means a lot to anyone to have his work recognized. I'll tell you what, I'll feel Peter out on the subject and get back to you.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Our friend Ray's motivation seems focused on his esteem need. His need for recognition or attention hasn't been satisfied. Sure, he's got a home, a wife and family, but what he now needs to motivate him, to make him perform better in his job, is the satisfaction that will come only when he feels that his need for esteem has been met. Quite simply, Ray's boss only needs to acknowledge Ray's efforts, to stroke him a bit, to get Ray motivated. Obviously, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Ray's physiological, safety, and social needs have been satisfied. His need for esteem, however, must now be satisfied if he is to feel motivated in his job. Finally, said Maslow, man's highest and greatest need is for self-actualization. When all man's lower-level needs are satisfied, man's higher needs take over, including self-actualization, the need to feel that one is making a significant contribution, that one is performing at one's highest level, and that one's contributions are meaningful. But how can you tell what needs are operating in an individual at any given time? To alert you to what need level a person is at, you should be on the lookout for certain cues in a person's behavior or speech patterns. For example, someone's need for security manifests itself when he or she talks about bad times, possible layoffs, shutdowns, what can go wrong all the time. Someone who's always chatting at work, engaging in small talk of no consequence, needs to have his or her social needs satisfied. And further, an individual who works all the time and talks about it in loving terms is seeking self-actualization if it hasn't been achieved already, and so on. In the late 1950s, Frederick Hertzberg and his associates suggested a theory of motivation based upon research with working people. Hertzberg accepted Maslow's premise that the satisfaction of needs is the primary factor in motivation. That is, a person will be motivated to do something if doing it satisfies that person's primary need. But Hertzberg refined Maslow's theory. He set out to discover the kinds of things that make people happy or satisfied on the job, and the kinds of things that make them unhappy and dissatisfied. He asked workers one key question.
Think of a time when you felt exceptionally good or exceptionally bad about your job, either your present job or any other job you've had. Tell me what happened.
Upon analysis, Hertzberg found that people responded in such a manner as to isolate two different kinds of needs which appeared to be independent. When they reported unhappiness and job dissatisfaction, they attributed their feelings to the job environment and not necessarily to the job itself. They were usually unhappy about the lack of air conditioning, the location of a desk, or the amount of money they were paid. But when people reported happiness or job satisfaction, they almost always attributed this good feeling to the work itself or to the job content. They reported that they enjoyed the responsibilities they were given or that their ideas and suggestions were acted upon. Hertzberg called the factors in the job environment hygiene factors because they act like factors in medical hygiene, the preventative measures that keep you from becoming ill. They don't necessarily make you well, but they do help you maintain your status quo. In the job situation, hygiene factors include physical working conditions, like air conditioning, light, and heat, safety conditions, like job security, for example, and social conditions, like pleasant people to work with. Job dissatisfaction results when these factors deteriorate below the level the worker feels is acceptable. However, when these dissatisfiers in the job environment are removed or improved, the worker doesn't necessarily develop the high levels of satisfaction or motivation one would expect. Rather, he or she simply slips into a neutral state of neither satisfaction nor dissatisfaction. On the other hand, the job factors that lead to positive attitudes, satisfaction and motivation, the ones Hertzberg called motivators, are the factors in the work itself which satisfy the individual's needs for esteem and self-actualization. The motivators are such factors as achievement and recognition for it, challenging and interesting work, increased job responsibility, and opportunities for growth and development. Interesting work includes variety, creativity, and challenge, as opposed to routine and repetition. If all of these things are present in the job, they lead to the workers being motivated. What Hertzberg was saying was that What were traditionally thought to be motivators, that is, wage incentives, improved interpersonal relationships, and establishing proper working conditions, did not lead to increased motivation. They merely removed dissatisfactions and acted to prevent problems. However, only motivators make people better performers. Hygiene is not enough. Rather, the motivation to work must come from job enrichment, more challenging jobs and opportunities for growth, and supervisors who are aware of every worker's need for recognition, achievement, and self-actualization. Whether a person spends 8 hours a day feeling bored or feeling worthwhile is a fundamental factor in motivation.
Say, Bill, after you finish filing those client account folders, would you call the people on this list to make sure we've got their names, titles, and addresses correct? Bill?
Okay, Jerry.
Something bugging you, Bill?
Well, sort of. When I started to work here a year ago, I knew there would be some piddling clerical jobs that needed to be done, and I figured if I did them well, my efforts would be recognized, and I'd get more challenging work to do. Instead, I come to find out that because I do my tasks so well, I just get more of the same. You know, I am a college grad. I've always excelled at anything I set my mind to. It bothers me that I just don't feel like excelling here anymore because the work is just not stimulating. It's boring, and that bothers me a lot.
Gee, Bill, I'm sorry to hear that. But really, I don't think you have that much to complain about. Your work environment is pleasant. You're highly regarded by the management and well-liked by your coworkers. You get a performance appraisal and a raise every year you're employed here. I should think you'd be happy.
Don't get me wrong, Jerry. Those things are great. I appreciate all those things.
I'm glad to hear it. Keep up the good work.
Sure. Just that those things aren't enough. It's real hard to keep up the good work when I'm bored to death.
Bill's manager, Jerry, seems caught up in the hygiene aspect of managing others, but will have a difficult job truly motivating them without expanding his awareness in ways suggested by Hertzberg. Others, besides Hertzberg, began to examine the higher-level needs, the esteem needs, and the self-actualization needs that Maslow proposed to give us useful ways of looking at motivation. David McClelland, for example, another university psychologist, suggested that these needs have three major components: the need for achievement, the need for affiliation, and the need for power. People, characteristically, seem to be dominated by one or another or a combination of these different needs. The need for achievement is the need to accomplish something, to complete a task to the best of one's ability. Here's what an achievement-oriented person might sound like.
When I accomplish something, I want to know that the big shots are watching and I get duly rewarded for my efforts. Maybe I'm compulsive, but I don't like being distracted or interrupted. I want to do my job the way I feel it should be done, because nothing's more important to me than my job.
McClelland also identified what he called the need for affiliation, the need to see and talk to people in the workplace, the need for social contact. Here's what a person motivated by the need for affiliation might sound like.
I like going to work because I have friends there, and that helps make my day go by faster. Sure, the work is monotonous, but it pays the bills, and it sure beats being out of work. Besides, I like the feeling I get when I'm with people. I can tolerate almost any job if there are people around to relate to.
Finally, McClelland suggested that some people are motivated or driven by the need for power. They are happiest when they are in the driver's seat, making the decisions and giving the directions. Here's what a power-oriented person might sound like.
I want to know that what I say is going to happen does happen. The people who work for me better do what I expect them to do. I didn't come this far in my career just settling for what somebody might feel is adequate. I set high standards for myself and expect the same from my staff.
Are any of McClelland's need traits good or bad in themselves, or are they mutually exclusive? No. Any one of us probably has one or another of these need traits dominant in our personality, and probably we all exhibit all of them in one degree or another in difficult situations. Nevertheless, a secretary who has a great need for achievement would probably work better in a private office than in a typing pool, while the person with a strong need for affiliation would be quite happy in a large office environment. As with Maslow, the idea is to satisfy the internal need of the person, whatever that internal motivator is.
You are listening to the Salinger audio cassette on motivation. We have just heard a discussion of the theories of Maslow, Hertzberg, and McClellan, who propose that people are motivated by the desire to satisfy certain internal needs. Next, we will discuss the differences between individuals and situations, and how these individual differences and situational differences must be acknowledged when the goal is getting people motivated.
Different approaches to worker motivation have been associated with a number of terms, such as job enrichment, need hierarchy, self-actualization, and so on. Nevertheless, these theories have in common a series of implicit, yet perhaps incorrect, assumptions. One such assumption is,
all employees are alike.
Different theories present different ways of looking at people, but each assumes that all employees are basically similar in their makeup. The assumption is that they all want to be paid well, they all want a pleasant work environment, and so on.
All situations are alike.
Most theories assume that all managerial situations are more or less alike, and that the managerial course of action to motivate people is pretty much the same in all situations. Out of these two assumptions, that people and situations are pretty much alike, there emerges a basic principle that there can be one best way to motivate employees. If any of these one best way approaches are applied in the correct situation, they probably will work. None, however, have proven to be foolproof. To deal with this problem, a number of psychologists, including Lyman Porter and Edward Lawler at the University of California at Berkeley, proposed an approach to looking at motivation that assumes that people are different. They called their approach expectancy theory, because it is based largely on the expectations as well as the needs and values each individual brings to any situation. Since people differ in their expectations, skills, needs, and values, what will motivate them must differ also. In addition, situations differ, further complicating their motivation.
Since all people are different, and since all situations are different, there can be no one best way to motivate all people in all situations. Instead, we find that behavior is determined by a combination of forces in the individual and forces in the environment.
Further, feedback from the interactions between the individual and the environment also affects behavior. Remember our definition of motivation at the beginning of this tape. We said that motivation is best understood in the context of the system within which it operates, namely, people. The forces operating within the person, the forces in the surrounding environment, and the feedback from the interaction between these forces all affect motivation. So, neither the individual alone nor the environment alone determines motivated behavior. People come into organizations with their own sets of needs, ways of looking at the world, and expectations. The environment provides structures, such as pay scales and supervision, which also influence behavior. Different environments produce different behavior patterns in similar people, just as dissimilar people tend to behave differently in similar environments.
People make their own decisions about their own behavior.
People decide consciously how they will behave in terms of their coming to work, staying at work, being a member of the organization. They also decide how hard they will work, how much they will produce, and at what quality, and so on.
Different people have different types of needs, desires, and goals.
Individuals differ on what rewards they want from work.
People make decisions among alternative courses of action based on how they believe a given behavior will affect desired outcomes.
People tend to do those things which they see as leading to outcomes or rewards they desire, and they avoid doing those things they see as leading to outcomes that are not desired. Faced with any task, an individual's motivation to accomplish it will depend then on that individual's perception of his or her skills in performing the task, what the expected reward is, and what the individual's internal motivators are. That is, how much does the individual value that particular reward?
If I get all this work done by noon, the boss will give me the afternoon off. Now that's better than getting more money as far as I'm concerned. Besides, I can do this job in my sleep.
As we can see, this man has all the ingredients for high motivation. He perceives he has the skill and expects to be able to perform. The boss has given the expectation of receiving the reward if he does perform. And finally, he values the reward offered. Combine all these ingredients, and you can bet you'll see motivation. Now, turn the tape over for the second part of the Salinger program on motivation. More recently, other theories have been proposed that differ significantly from the so-called needs theories discussed earlier. Whereas the needs theories are largely based on the individual, these newer theories, the so-called social comparison or equity theories, place greater emphasis on group influences and the individual's perceptions of others. Similar to the expectancy theories, these theories posit the fact that behavior is determined largely by the situation as perceived by a worker, and not necessarily on the situation as it actually is. Reality, then, is an individual matter, and it differs from person to person. So, if managers are to motivate employees, they must be aware of the social processes going on in their organizations, and they must view motivation in dynamic, changing terms. If an employee believes he or she is being inequitably treated, say paid at a lower rate than others seen as equals, then the employee will not be motivated to increase effort. Therefore, managers must find ways to ensure that employees perceive they are being treated fairly. Again, employee perceptions of the situation are more important here than objective reality. The fact that a manager feels an employee is overpaid for his work means little unless the employee also feels that way. Much of the research in this field has concentrated on money or pay equity, since money is one of the few outcomes or rewards that is easily quantifiable, that people can clearly see and assess.
I don't know why I bust my buns trying to get all these circuits out so fast. I've been working here as long as Al has, and I'm sure he makes more than I do. It's just not fair.
Something bothering you, Rick?
Oh, hi, June. I didn't know you were standing there.
Rick, I've noticed you seem to be a lot less enthusiastic about your work lately. Is there something I can do or something you want to talk about?
Well, can I speak with you about something confidential? Maybe if I talk it out, I'll feel better.
Well, sure, Rick. Let's go into my office. Okay, now. What seems to be the problem?
I don't know, June. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm making as much money as Al and the other guys doing the same job. Al, for instance, is always bragging about the things he buys and the trips he takes. I just barely make enough to make ends meet, and we both do the same job and have been here about the same time.
I see. You think the other guys are making more than you for doing the same job.
That's right.
Well, you understand that I'm not at liberty to discuss the other employees' earnings with you, but I will tell you this. All of the people in your area are paid according to structured pay scales. Both you and Al came in at about the same starting salary, and your current wages are very similar. I can't explain what Al does with his money. That's none of my business. But he is married, and his wife works. If she's got a good-paying job, that probably has a lot to do with why he seems to be able to buy more things than you.
Gee, I guess you're right. I'm really sorry I made an issue about this. Of course his wife works. I feel really dumb.
Don't worry about it. If something does bother you, you can come and talk to me about it any time, Rick.
Thanks, June. I'm glad we could talk.
You are listening to the Salinger audio tape on motivation. We have just heard a discussion on the equity or social comparison theory of motivation. Coming up, situational leadership in the context of motivating employees.
Certain researchers like Paul Hersey, a behavioral scientist, have devised management and specifically leadership models based on whatever particular situation a manager and an employee may find themselves in. Hersey proposed what he calls situational leadership as an approach to motivating people. He has identified 4 leadership styles, each one based upon 2 factors. 1, the leader's task behavior, that is, the amount of job direction the leader gives. And 2, the leader's relationship behavior, that is, the amount of support the leader gives in assisting the worker in accomplishing the task.
Style 1. High task and low relationship behavior.
Leadership Style 1 is directive. A leader using Style 1 leadership tells his or her people exactly what and how something is to be done. The communication is typically one way. This style can be effective when people need structure due to lack of ability, clarity and confidence, or during an emergency or crisis situation when people's feelings of competence and self-worth aren't the issue. It may not be the appropriate style, however, when dealing with highly competent or experienced personnel who have a good handle on their jobs and responsibilities.
Style 2. High task and high relationship behavior.
Leadership Style 2 provides guidance. A leader using Style 2 not only tells his people what he or she wants done, but also provides support and open two-way communication channels. For example, a manager will direct the activities of a newly promoted employee, while at the same time provide support and guidance, allowing the employee to ask questions. This style is very effective with individuals who do not yet have the full ability to do a task, but are very motivated to succeed in that task.
Style 3. Low task and high relationship behavior.
Leadership Style 3 promotes discussion and encourages contributions from the followers with little direction, if any, provided by the leader. A manager using Leadership Style 3 will support and encourage the employee while allowing the employee to operate fairly independently. This works with people whose confidence or desires need a little boost, yet who know how to do a job. The low task behavior works well with people ready to satisfy their esteem need, associated with taking more control over their work. Conversely, this would not be the appropriate behavior to use on an employee or group of employees faced with a new and unfamiliar task.
Leadership Style 4. Low task behavior and low relationship behavior.
When a leader knows his people are capable and effective, he or she can afford to offer little or no direction, as well as little or no support, guidance, or two-way communication. This style is called delegation. If a salesperson has successfully handled and closed numerous large sales, the sales manager need not monitor the salesperson's activities through to the close of yet another sale. This style helps maintain the motivation of a highly able and motivated person. It is only through delegation that genuine self-actualization is possible. On the other hand, a new trainee on the job would not be best handled by being ignored and left to fend for him or herself. The critical factor in determining success within the leader-follower relationship is the leader's ability and willingness to accomplish a specific task. Employees' readiness levels, their amounts of ability and willingness, range from very high to very low. Consequently, the leader must ascertain the follower's readiness level before determining which style of leadership to use.
I'm so excited about presenting this new ad campaign to our client, Joe. I'm a little nervous, but I can't wait.
Well, Mary, when I recommended you for promotion to account executive, I knew you were capable. Your efforts in the media department didn't go unnoticed.
Thanks, Joe. I know I can do a good job with the client, but at the same time, it'll mean a lot to me knowing you're there at this meeting, just in case.
Well, I will be there just in case you need me. But I'm going to let you handle as much of the meeting as you can on your own.
I really appreciate that, Joe.
Joe has ascertained that Mary is capable, although somewhat low on confidence regarding this task. Joe is using Leadership Style 3, high relationship and low task behavior with Mary. He is going to support and facilitate her thinking. That's the high relationship part. At the same time, he is not going to tell her what to do every step of the way. That's what we mean by low task, low amounts of directive behavior. A manager who wants to motivate an employee or group of employees takes every aspect of the situation into account: the task, the organization, the people involved, and the employee's readiness levels. By using the right leadership style in the right situation, worker motivation should be developed and maintained with worker satisfaction and effectiveness as positive byproducts. It is perhaps interesting to note that the earliest theories of how people could be motivated dealt only with external motivators, with rewards or punishments applied indiscriminately to everyone in the workplace. Dr. Abraham Maslow was perhaps among the first major theoreticians to recognize the fact that motivation was as much an internal matter as it was an external one, and that considering people's needs and the satisfaction of those needs was perhaps the key to motivation. More recently, of course, particularly with the advent of situational leadership, it has come to be recognized that any adequate theory of motivation had to include both internal and external motivators, depending on the nature of the individual, the nature of the situation, and the nature of the interaction, the feedback between them. This might be called a systems approach, since it considers not only the elements involved in motivating people, but also the interaction between those elements. We have discussed several theories of motivation, including the needs theories of Maslow and others, which say that people are motivated when they perceive a causal relationship between the completion of a task and the satisfaction of a need. Hertzberg's theory focuses on job satisfiers and dissatisfiers. McClellan's concept is that people have different degrees of the need for achievement, power, or affiliation. Expectancy theory says that our expectations of the results of successfully completing a task has a major impact on our motivation. Equity, or social comparison theory, says that our perception of the equity of a situation largely determines our task motivation. Situational leadership says we must consider the worker's readiness for the task, our relationship to the worker, and the amount of direction the leader must provide to motivate workers. These theories are not that dissimilar. In fact, they complement each other and build a rich understanding of both internal and external motivators. So what's the best way to motivate people? Whatever works for you or for your organization. Hopefully, listening to this tape, you've become more aware of your own needs as well as those of your coworkers. Finally, whichever approach to motivation you decide to use, keep in mind these 5 salient points proven to be effective in motivating people.
1. Maintain and enhance a person's self-esteem.
A person whose self-esteem and image is maintained, who thinks he or she is held in high regard by others, is far more likely to be motivated than one whose self-esteem is shattered.
2. Use active listening to show understanding.
Active listening is the ability to pick up, define, and respond accurately to the feelings and needs expressed by others. It is learning to really listen, without interrupting or projecting one's own opinion or ego. If an employee is angry and frustrated, the manager who actively listens may diffuse that anger and turn it around toward motivated behavior. Active listening is a threefold process. First, the supervisor listens without interrupting and makes no value judgments. Second, the supervisor captures the employee's feelings and understands why the employee is feeling the way he or she feels. And third, the supervisor reiterates or feeds back what he or she thinks the employee is feeling and why. For example, if an employee says something like, "Judy always gets the easy jobs and you save the hard ones for me," a supervisor's active listening response might be, "You feel that I'm picking on you and that I'm unfair about the way I assign work." Whereas this response might not immediately solve the problem, it definitely does establish the fact that the supervisor has listened and sets the groundwork for calm discussion. Remember, when a person feels he or she is being actively listened to, the effect is comforting. And active listening promotes rapport between supervisor and employee.
3. Use reinforcement techniques to shape behavior.
Positive reinforcement or reward causes repeat behavior. The most obvious example of positive reinforcement is the use of salary increases. However, praise can be a most effective reward, but should be used in moderation. Remember what we said earlier, a little goes a long way.
4. Focus on behavior, not feelings or personality.
Avoid vague comments like, "Your work is awful," or "Have a positive attitude." These comments are not only vague and ineffective, they can easily mean different things to different people. Rather, comment on specific identifiable behavior. Say things like, "You need to watch out for typographical errors. I've been catching many of them lately." In other words, criticism should be specific.
5. Set solid goals and maintain communication.
As we said earlier, vague comments like "do your best" mean nothing. Goals or objectives should be specific, clearly stated, and clearly measurable. Goals which fulfill these criteria provide a source of feedback, accountability, and evaluation. It is a sad fact that the chaotic office where no one really knows what to do, and very few ever get feedback on what is or is not being done effectively, is more the rule than the exception. Do not say, "I want you to get this work done soon." Rather say, "The goal is to increase production 20% by June 16th. Don't say, "We've got to discuss this together sometime." Instead say, "Let's get together on June 5th at 3 o'clock to review our progress."
We hope you've enjoyed listening to this Salinger audio tape on motivation. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please write to us at Salinger Audio, 1635 12th Street, Santa Monica, California, 90404, or call us at 213-450-1300. We'd appreciate hearing from you.